My name's Eliza and I'm 17 and I struggle with anxiety. So I was diagnosed with anxiety when I was 14 and I didn't really talk about it very much at all even. I isolated myself from my family and friends and I kept a lot of it to myself. And I think looking back it's probably one of the worst things you can do. It will affect your whole life and it's something that you can change and deal with, which is something I wish I had known, because when I got help it was the best thing that happened to me and it did change my life. A lot of my anxiety stemmed from exams and the pressure that comes from school and all that, which is why I wanted to do something to talk about anxiety and stress in exams and how you can deal with it and, you know, what not to do, what to do, all that kind of stuff. So I think stress and anxiety is a completely normal part of everyday life. It's a rational emotion that, within reason, is actually quite a good thing because it can be used as motivation and to work hard. But the problem arises when it becomes like overwhelming and uncontrollable. And you know, if it's affecting your day-to-day life, if you don't want to get out of bed in the morning, or you know, if you're not sleeping properly or you lose your appetite, it can be quite detrimental. And this is when you kind of need to think there is a problem. So exams are very subjective. They suit one type of person, you know, the person that can just retain information and has a great memory. I think it's quite sad because obviously it doesn't exploit everyone's talents, but they are the way young people are examined. And if you are someone like me that really does struggle with exams, it's honestly not the end of the world, and there are stuff you can do to deal with the worry and anxiety. And if you feel like you are the only one struggling, you're not, because I did for a long time, which is one of the reasons I kept it to myself. But so many young people, you'd be surprised at how many people do struggle with the stress and worry, and not just with exams, but with day-to-day life. So if you are struggling and you are keeping it to yourself, talk about it, because bottling it up can just make it so much worse. I think some of the massive things that trigger stress are like thoughts and fear of the future. You know, you think my whole life depends on this, and if I don't get grades, ultimately, you know, I'm not going to have a future, I'm going to be unsuccessful. For me, it was this thing about making my family especially proud, and you know, I was like, if I don't do well, they're not going to be proud of me and they've done so much for me and all that kind of stuff. Competition with like peers and friends, I think, is also another big thing that triggers stress, because a lot of the time you can be like, well, why is my best friend getting A stars and why is she getting B's and I'm working so hard and all I can get is a C? Because that is something that, you know, would happen with me and I would put myself down for it. And I think striving for perfection and like, you know, it's something that I think everyone does to an extent, but it's not necessary. You can still do really well without trying to be perfect, basically. I'd say some really important things to remember and like do's and don'ts is like, you've got to remember when you're doing exams that you can be successful with or without grades. Even if you get no grades, you can still do incredibly well in your life, have a brilliant career and a wonderful future. And I think that's something that isn't emphasised enough, especially to young people. It's all about work hard and get the grades, when it's not all about that. It is about, you know, trying your best, and that's the most important thing. Everyone's individual, so, you know, I know some people will be like, I've done all this revision and I haven't put the book down and I haven't slept since like, you know, last year because I've just been revising. And that's great, and if that works for them, that's fantastic, but it's not going to work for everyone. On top of that, they might just be saying it to make themselves feel better, so don't be intimidated or overwhelmed by what you hear your peers saying and stuff like that. A really difficult one, and this is something I do all the time and I still do, is, as difficult as it is, try not to compare yourself to others, because, you know, like I've said, everyone is different and you've just got to do you, basically. I really believe if you've done everything you can and you know you've done everything you can, you've tried your best, that's the most important thing. And that's an achievement in itself, not the grades. In terms of dealing with the pressure you might be feeling, I'd say definitely take time out for yourself. I think that's so important. If you're revising and you're just not getting it or you want to cry, take a break, eat some chocolate, watch a trashy movie, sing, I don't know, whatever you want to do. Just don't sit there and keep trying to do it, because that's what I did. I just constantly revise and I just end up crying with a textbook, and it was so unproductive. And mentally, I think I made myself worse for the exams because I scared myself of it to an extent. I created a mental phobia, which is quite detrimental. As difficult as this is as well, because this is something I did, is negative self-talk can be so bad for when you take your exams. You know, if you tell yourself you're a failure and you can't do it and you won't do it, you won't, and that is something I did. And I probably could have done a lot better had I did okay in the end, but I could have done better if I'd actually gone into my exams and said, you know what, I can do this, I've done the work for it. And a positive mindset will actually get you so much further, whereas I would just be like, well, I failed this, what the hell? And it's not a good way forward. I'd say don't shut people out either. If you are struggling, really talk to someone, because it is so important. And I got a really bad grade on one exam that I did, and I was so gutted about it. And this wonderful teacher sat with me, and I think this is the most important thing anyone's ever said to me, is fundamentally nothing has changed. You're still the same person you were before you got the bad grade or had the bad exam. You're still that person, and it's important to not lose sight of who you are when you go through exams, because you're not your grade and your grades don't define you. Nothing's ever as bad as it seems, and although exams do feel like the end of the world at the time, they are only a temporary struggle. If you've done your best, then you've succeeded, in my opinion. Sitting in an exam without panicking or having a panic attack, for me, was an achievement in itself, regardless of the grade, because that is something that you've done if you've managed to sit in an exam hall and not panic. And grades don't define you. Everyone has their own talents. Grades aren't everything. And your mental well-being is so much more important. No one expects you to get 10 A stars and be emotionally and mentally destroyed by the end of it. I think everyone would be happy if you get a set of good, decent grades and actually be happy and healthy. I think that's the most important thing. Take every day as it comes, because I don't think exams are going to last forever.